Hi guys and girls, I'm Q&Ant and welcome to the latest episode of Q&Ant. This is the series where I take a bunch of questions, topics and subjects submitted by my supporters and go into detail and answer them. Of course, this video is watchable by all of my audience, whether you're a subscriber or whether you're here for the first time, it's all good. But the subjects themselves are, like I say, submitted by supporters. It's just another way of me saying thank you for all the support that you've given me over the past few years. It's literally meant the world to me. Very, very much changed my whole life. YouTube is a big thing to me, and without it, without your support, I wouldn't really be able to do all the things that I do here now. So yeah, as always, thank you very, very much for that. Now, if you would like to join, if you'd like to submit some questions yourself, or if you'd just like to help out here and there, then you can do so. Have a look at the links in the video description where you'll find a link to my Patreon page. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member. Just click the join button below the video. But if not, all's good. You can of course watch this video and all other videos I release as well. Thank you for that. Now onto the questions then. Commander Jinx Chrome says, this is the first question ever. How do I manage to create the fantastic camera spaceship movements when you're recording your Elite Dangerous videos? So yeah, thank you very, very much for the compliment there. The external camera in Elite can be a tricky thing, but once you understand how it works, it's extremely flexible. Essentially, I've bound all the movements of the camera to my HOTAS, so basically I fly the camera in exactly the same way that I'd fly a ship. There's still some movement restrictions, unfortunately, such as the distance the camera can be placed from the ship, and this is especially noticeable when down on planets where that distance is greatly reduced. But for the most part, it works really well, and it's pretty much intuitive. So the takeaway here, my recommendation is that if you want to do any space-based footage, external shots and stuff, then just think about your camera as a spaceship and fly it in the same manner. Alex says, do I use voice attack along with HDS voice packs when I'm not recording? Now, I do enjoy the voice packs from HDS and I feel that they are exceptional quality. I even have my own voice pack with them, just called Obsidian. I recorded that a few years ago in the studio with HDS. I've also used a lot of different voice packs myself from HDFs over the past, but I haven't actually used them all that much recently. And the reason being is that the Chapter 4 update for Beyond brought with it a bunch of gameplay that has kept me actively engaged, such as mining and exploring, and you pretty much all know that I'm a massive fan of exploration. And I've not really found the need to use the voice packs for this type of gameplay. But I hear there's a new voice pack coming, there's a new one on the way if it's not out already, so I will no doubt be taking a look at that one at some point. Now, Brian wants to know whether I've ever played Free Space and if I'd consider revisiting it if I have. So Free Space is very close to the top of my favourite combat space games of all time, and Free Space 2 was even better. And yeah, there's a reason that the game is still played and modded even to this day. It's an exceptional game, very, very good, especially for the time during when it was released. There wasn't a whole lot of space games out back then, and it really was something else, especially compared to the old 16-bit era games that had been around previously to that. There's actually an awesome community and a whole load of mods that are available for Free Space 2. And one specific that I'd like to mention is Battlestar Galactica, a mod called a Diaspora, which is well worth looking at if you haven't done so already. And if I remember, I hope I remember, I'll stick in some video footage as I'm talking right now. Also, a few months ago, a fan made a launcher for Free Space. Now, I believe the launcher is called Gnosos, at least that's how I'm pronouncing it, reading what's said here. There's a link to it in the video description. Essentially what it does is allow you to install a load of mods very, very quickly, just by a few clicks from the launcher. So, yeah, definitely very nice. And I'll have a look at this, will be having a look at this rather, and it'll be something I'll be covering on my channel over the coming weeks. Now, Paul wants to know if I'd ever considered doing hints and tips videos for Star Citizen. So I'm actually not sure whether or not I'd go ahead and do hints and tips videos for Star Citizen, because, well, basically Star Citizen's still in very much early development, and any videos I put together now, any hints and tips I create now, could well be out of date in a week or a few months from now. The game is constantly changing. But that said, I'm certainly a fan of Star Citizen, and I'm definitely going to be making more videos on the game very soon, so do keep an eye out on that, because they will be arriving very soon on the channel. Zed wants to know if I've ever played The Fall by Over the Moon, and if so, what did I think? So, I haven't played The Fall, but after I saw your question, I did go ahead and have a look about it. And yeah, it does look very interesting indeed. And to be honest, I was kind of surprised, and I've never noticed the title before, because it really does look like the exact type of game that I'd be really interested in. I did also notice that it's got very positive reviews over on Steam, which is always a good indication. So when I next get the chance, I'm definitely going to take a look at it. And I guess, Zed, that you've played the game as well? Carol wants to know if I'm going to be at LaveCon. So I'm definitely going to be at LaveCon this year, and perhaps surprisingly, I've never yet had the chance to get to LaveCon before, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Now, I did attend a Fantasticon in 2018, and it really was an awesome event, fantastic time, met a lot of people, and also bumped into a bunch of people that I've met a few times before. And talking of Fantasticon 2019 is coming in August of this year, and there is a Kickstarter page active right now. If you click the link in the video description, it'll take you to the Kickstarter page where you can help out if you want to go to the event, if you want to buy some tickets. It will all contribute towards making Fantasticon 2019 a possibility. Now, I've also been to a few elite meets, and these are always great, but as for LaveCon itself, that I hear is in a very different league. It's in a league all of its own, something very special. So yep, definitely looking forward to it, and I will be there for sure. Now, Sergeant Stubby has got a slightly longer question here. I'm actually going to read this one out in its entirety. He says, Anthem devs recently came out publicly saying that they will not announce any changes to the game until they're near completion. And this is because of their failed roadmap for the game that currently has players frustrated. Elite has roughly the same policy. We don't get information about updates until they're nearly ready to drop on the live servers. Question is, do you feel that this is good for the game, as it drives down expectations and gives players less to be angry about? Or is this a symptom of something else? So personally, I don't think that this is a good thing for games. I don't think it's a good thing for Elite hiding a roadmap. I don't think it's good for any games. Basically, the way I see it is that if it's managed correctly, if the expectations and community are managed correctly, then games can do very well with roadmaps and information releases. And Warframe is one of the best examples of this. Digital Extremes released the latest roadmap, or the last roadmap, nearly 1 year ahead of the content releases. And they also frequently engage with the community, giving inside looks at ongoing development and sneak peeks and development builds and all the rest of it. So whilst they still make mistakes, why Digital Extremes undoubtedly make mistakes and not every idea they have turns out to be ideal, it is overall, generally speaking, very well received. There's not quite the anger about updates or unannounced updates or missing content that you hear with some other games. Now, Frontier have released roadmaps in the past with Elite Dangerous, specifically during EGX 2015. 2015, and I went to that one myself, and they did give out a very detailed roadmap for the Horizons content. You can probably see it on the YouTube channel now. It does seem that might not have worked out too well for Frontier though, because obviously by now we know there was some extensive delays with the release of the Horizons content. But nonetheless, Horizons did do something similar with the Frontier Expo in 2017, but it was somewhat scaled back and a little bit more vague when compared to the EGX 2015 announcements. But of course, even with the Expo announcements, Frontier didn't actually end up releasing all of the content that they announced, and specifically this pertains to ice worlds and fleet carriers, and quite naturally and quite understandably there was a little bit of a backlash around this. Fans and players did get a little bit frustrated, but ultimately I think that is for the best. Not them getting angry, of course, but I still think it's for the best that companies like Frontier actually reveal a roadmap and take the risk of getting a bit of a backlash when things don't pay out. But for whatever reason, Frontier don't see it this way. They seem to want to play things close to their chest, and for them, I guess Frontier feel the roadmaps don't work too well. And so here we are in 2019, mid-2019 nearly, and we still don't have any information on the 2020 release. But yeah, outside of that, beyond that, I do also think that the entire concept of roadmaps is a symptom of wider issues, and that issue is live service games. Many developers are moving over to live service games, which I guess makes sense. It's a good business idea because it keeps people engaged for longer, and if they're engaged for longer, they're likely to spend more money on the same game. But as Anthem shows, these type of games don't always work out too well. For me though, the bottom line here is that developers want the best of both worlds. At least that's the impression I get. They seem to want players to buy into their live service games, of which Elite, of course, is certainly a live service games, and the developers want players to engage with these games for years at a time. But on the other hand, somewhat paradoxically, the developers are also reluctant to reveal information about the future of the game and give players a reason for looking forward to what's coming next. Like I say, Warframe, a very good example of this. Digital Extremes give long lead times to future content, so it can work. But ultimately, I guess this is perhaps, from a business point of view at least, it doesn't matter too much to a game like Elite Dangerous. I mean, Frontier don't make too much money from players playing Elite Dangerous. It's not like it's subscription based. If you're on the servers, then you're using the server bandwidth and costing Frontier money. So I guess perhaps from their point of view, if you stop playing, it doesn't really matter to them too much, as long as you come back when they release the next update. Then again, maybe that's just my personal take on it. But personally, I'd much rather see content that keeps players invested for a much longer time. Now, Duchess Elysium says, is there any news on more expansion out in the core? And by the core, I assume you mean the centre of the galaxy where Explorer's Anchorage, the station, was recently built. Also, one of my plans for the future videos. So thank you very much for the comments there. The rest of your post has some really nice comments. Thank you. Yes, I do have some plans for the future of the channel, and you've probably seen some of this over the past 6 to 12 months where my content has been kind of evolving, and I'll certainly be continuing in that direction. And there'll be more videos focused on the games industry and many other games besides Elite, but Elite, of course, will always be my main focus. And talking of Elite, talking of the question you have there about expansion in the core, obviously I don't know what will happen there, but personally I'd be very surprised if things remain the same. I would like to see some extra stations out that way. Nothing perhaps quite on the scale of Colonia, but another area of civilization would be pretty nice, wouldn't it? Loopy McLoopface wants to know... Loopy McLoopyface even. Sorry, I'll get it right in a minute. What are my thoughts on Space Engineers? So I don't really play Space Engineers. I've played it in the past. I do have it in my Steam library, but I haven't played it for a good number of years. But I do recognise that it's a very well-made game. But games that focus primarily on building generally are not really my thing personally. But that said, I really should take another look at it at some point. I know it's changed immensely since I last played it, so it's something I should definitely load up and check out. Lucas says they have left Elite for the last couple of weeks due to burnout, and they have questions about content improvement. So a little bit hard to read your question there, but I think you're asking about releases of new content. So if that is the question, then I can discuss it here. If not, then I apologise for not quite understanding what you're asking. But anyway, new content is always needed for games like Elite. Like I say earlier on, Elite is a live service game, and one way of keeping players engaged is to keep giving them new content. In fact, this idea of keeping players engaged actually come up quite a few times during this month's Q&Ant, or this video, this episode, this series of Q&Ant, whatever way you want to look at it. And we'll have that same question come up, or similar question come up again in a minute from Spidey. But to go back to this again for the minute, yeah, there's going to be a few small updates over the next year or so. Frontier have said they're going to release small updates every 3 to 4 months, so I'd imagine we'd see another update around August time. But clearly everyone is still waiting for the big 2020 update. That's the one that everyone is hanging on for. But it's a shame it's such a long way away, and I'm really hoping that Frontier kind of cave in and give some news on this sooner rather than later, because if not, I guess people are just going to keep guessing. They're going to keep just coming up with ideas, theory crafting, and keep relying on these leaks that appear in every so often. Now, Spidey says that his concern is that Frontier are not putting effort into long-term players. He cites the April update, which of course was new player-centric, as a reason for feeling this, as well as the fact that Frontier have not released any new large ships that would be aimed at perhaps longer-term players, and instead focus on medium ships, which are generally slightly easier affordable by people who haven't been playing too long. So yeah, I entirely agree with this. A lot of long-term players are itching for new content. However, Frontier might have a different perspective on this. They may see it in a slightly different way, at least from a business point of view. And the reason I think that is because the bulk of Frontier's income from Elite Dangerous actually comes from sales of new copies of the game. So basically, long-term players generate far less money than new players. So from a business point of view, Frontier are likely going to want to keep focusing on the new players so they can sell more copies of the game. For the financial year 2018, Frontier made £22 million on Elite Dangerous, and out of that, only £4 million came from selling cosmetics. So things like paint jobs and that lot only accounted for just £4 million, whilst 18 million come from selling new copies of the game. So whilst cosmetics certainly do make money, it's the new player that Frontier are likely chasing, primarily because it's big money for them. So yeah, that's far from ideal for long-term players, but I guess from a business point of view, it means Frontier can keep working on the game. And whilst there's not a lot of content coming out right now, we do know they have a full team working on the 2020 update. Come on, Frontier, we really want some more news on that. People are pretty much begging for it now. Now, Alex has a question here talking about the future of Elite Dangerous coming again to the 2020 content. What's it gonna be? Well, obviously no one outside of Frontier actually knows what that is, but people are speculating, and Alex here is wondering whether or not it will be Space Legs. And yeah, Alex has got a very long post here, so Alex, do know that I have read your post. I've sat and thought about it. Very good post, but it's a little bit long for me to read out on the video right here, but nonetheless I will answer your points. So just to summarize very quickly, Alex kind of feels that Space Legs may be somewhat problematic for Elite Dangerous, partly because walking around is a very difficult thing to actually implement in the game, and Alex cites Star Citizen as being a prime example of how walking around on Space Legs can actually be a bit of a problem. And also, Alex feels that maybe some of the gameplay could be a bit bland, and they'd much prefer Frontier to focus on deep space-based gameplay that you actually do inside your ship. So yes, some valid concerns, and basically it's a feeling that is certainly shared by many people in the wider community, at least insofar as perhaps Space Legs not adding anything to the game. But in terms of walking around being something difficult to implement, I'd probably disagree with that. I'd say walking around is nothing new. At least for the last 15 to 20 years, many games have done walking around, and it's been done down to an art now. Pretty much every third-person or first-person game involves walking around. And of course, you can get onto horses in games like Red Dead Redemption or Witcher 3. You can get into cars in games like GTA 5, and even get into airplanes and helicopters in the same game as well. Now, undoubtedly, people are going to point out right here that Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen as well are on an entirely different scale as this, and that it's going to be much more difficult and has never actually been done before. Now, it's undoubtedly true that it's likely to be far more difficult, but it's not true that it's never been done before. No Man's Sky is a very good example of this. It's got a massive universe with a bunch of different planets. You can get into your ship and travel to another planet and leave your ship again, or head to a space station. Of course, the gameplay or the depth of gameplay might be entered into the question here, but we're talking about the capability of actually achieving Space Legs. It's also been done by Dual Universe, it's been done by Helion, it's also been done by X4, and in all of these games, these last 3 games, you can actually even leave your ship whilst in space. It really doesn't seem to be too much of an issue. So in terms of Elite Feet, or in terms of Space Legs, the concept isn't really entirely new, and it has certainly been done before and done to very good effect. And that's not to undermine what Frontier may or may not be working on with Elite Dangerous. Obviously, from a technical point of view, Space Legs would no doubt be very difficult to implement, but it's not as though no one has done anything like that before. But really, it's not so much the technical feasibility for Space Legs for me. or perhaps even Alex, the real question is, what would it offer Elite? What would it add to the game? And could they perhaps Frontier be better off by offering more space-based content for your spaceship? So for me to talk about that, I'd like to say that I absolutely love space games. Like Alex, I want to experience all there is to experience when it comes to flying a ship. I'd love to fly into the storms of a gas giant or land on the surface of an atmospheric world like Venus. And these are huge, huge things. And these are the things that I've always wanted to do since day one of Elite Dangerous, or even the first day of the Elite Dangerous Kickstarter all the way back in 2012. And Space Legs, well, it kind of takes the game in a very different direction to that. Instead of focusing on the macro scale of the galaxy, it brings things down to the micro scale of the individual. But perhaps that's not necessarily a bad thing. David Braben has always said that he wants Elite to be the experience of living in a sci-fi world, and I take that to mean fulfilling the dream of living in a world like Star Wars, Star Trek, The Expanse, or any other large-scale sci-fi world. And that is very appealing to me, and no doubt it's appealing to a lot of other people as well. Now, whether or not Frontier can pull it off is a massive question, and that of course assumes that Frontier are even heading in that direction to begin with. After all, we don't know even if Space Legs are ever going to actually be a thing. So for now, I'm still undecided on the potentials of Space Legs in terms of what it could actually offer. It could of course offer the ideal gameplay, the ideal sci-fi world, but it could equally offer some very bland, very basic gameplay that, well, wouldn't be too appealing. Ultimately, we're going to have to wait and see. For me personally, I'm still undecided on what I feel Space Legs would offer the game, and personally, given the choice between atmospheric worlds and a whole ton of space-based phenomena or walking around, I'd much prefer to see atmospheric worlds. But then again, it's equally possible that Frontier will deliver both of these at the same time. The bottom line is that we have no idea right now, and people are just going to keep on guessing until Frontier finally decide to release some news. So yeah, Frontier, come on, hurry up, give us some news. People are certainly waiting. So that, I think, brings us to the end of this episode of Q&Ant. It's been really great as always, talking about the various subjects you've put forth. I hope, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of them in the next episode. So do keep an eye out over on Patreon and the YouTube community, because sooner or later I'm going to be posting another post there asking for your information, for your topics and your suggestions. And meanwhile, if you'd like to join in yourselves, if you'd like to post a question to me, and you'd also like to support the channel, then do have a look at the video description. You'll find a link there to Patreon, and you can find more information there. Alternatively, you can hit the join button below this video and join the YouTube community here, and you'll get access to some private posts over on the community tabs. And everyone, of course, whatever type of backer you are, also gets access to a private Discord channel on my Discord server. But regardless of whether or not you actually come and support me, you're all supporting me just by watching these videos, and that always means a lot to me. So thank you very, very much. I'll catch you guys and girls next time.